Hi, and welcome back to another episode of You're in Charge. Now what? I'm your host, Glenn Pasch. And as you know, the goal of this channel is to help those of you that find yourself in charge, be it a project, a business, or a team, develop the skills necessary to generate consistent results. Each week, we're going to focus on one topic. We're going to bring in some guests, and we're going to talk about the journey of leadership, the journey of being in charge, so that you can learn some tactical things that you can apply right away to generate those consistent results. Now, if you're new to the channel, just please click the button down below. Please subscribe. That would mean a lot to me. And as I always say, share this out. There's a lot of people who could use this information, and you never know whose life you could impact by just sharing this video out. So I am really excited about having a conversation with my good friend, Tracy Myers. I've known Tracy for a while now, a long time, maybe. I don't know. We're getting up to about 8 to 10 years. And it's been fascinating watching your evolution. You've always been such a great friend and generous with your time. So I'm excited for the audience to meet you. So first off, thank you for being here. And then why don't you take 30 seconds and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. I appreciate you having me. I don't know that it will actually take 30 seconds. I'm sure we'll talk about most of this during the conversation. But essentially, my family's been entrepreneurs for it's 101 years this year, which is even difficult for me to believe.
Wow.
Three car dealerships now, which is kind of tough for me to believe. We've had over 15 over the years, and we can talk about that story too, about, the ones that succeeded and the ones that failed, and how I learned more from a lot more actually from the failures than I did from the successes. So
right.
In Winston-Salem, North Carolina, we're about 90 miles outside of Charlotte. So we're the third largest, fourth largest city in North Carolina.
Well, great. And I'm excited. Yeah, we're going to unpack a lot of stuff. But so let's start off with that, because you did touch on that. I asked this question of most of my guests now for this season, because we are focusing on the journey. And you touched on being from a family of entrepreneurs. But looking back on your life, was being in charge or running things always part of your life, or was this something that you came to later in terms of, I learned how to lead teams versus looking back and saying, somehow I was always in charge of all of my friends. I was in charge of this team. What would you say?
Yeah, no, I can definitely say that I wasn't that guy.
Right.
My dad was typical type A alpha male personality. He's still like that. He was in the military, and you did what he said do, and that was as a father and as an employer.
Right.
I remember growing up, I'm like, I'll never be that kind of dad, and I'll never be that kind of boss if I'm a boss. And surprisingly, you'd have to ask my children about the father part. But I know for a fact as an employer, I'm not a micromanager where my dad tends to be.
Right.
I'm not, except in my marketing persona, I'm not type A per se. I'm not the alpha male, maybe type A.
Right.
Definitely not a micromanager. That drives me insane. But I wasn't that person, not at all.
So then how did you evolve into someone now that is in charge of teams and in charge of multiple businesses? Besides the dealerships, you're out consulting to help other dealerships and businesses in general. Pre-COVID, you were out speaking, and you were also, had a business and with wrestling. So you had all of these things going on. Do you think that you evolved into this position just because you naturally are an entrepreneur and you figured it out, or you just found that I'm in charge now and I have to figure it out?
Well, and I know we're just having a conversation here, and I didn't even know what we're going to talk about, which I actually like this. So the one thing that really struck me is, did you know you'd be in charge? And I know what you mean, but I don't even like that term.
Right.
We have Bosses Day, and they celebrate Bosses Day for me, and they know that term even kind of it crawls on my skin a little bit, because I don't consider myself a boss, because by definition, I like to be a leader and a mentor, and,
right.
and not a boss. And you know that about me. as far as, is this something I've always done? I think I have always been an entrepreneur, because from an early age, my dad had me selling things and small trinkets in school. And I saw real quickly, and thank God he taught me that, because he didn't teach me that in school,
Right.
or anywhere else for that matter. I saw that was something, one, that I enjoyed, and two, I could take that foundation that he gave me and I could add blocks to that. And I think that's ultimately what an entrepreneur does. You start with a foundation, and then you build. And of course, as any successful entrepreneur knows, there are a lot of failures along the way. So we typically will build to a point, and those blocks come stumbling down, if we're using that analogy. And then we rebuild, maybe with different blocks, if that analogy makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. And I think what I heard, and I think it answered my question, and I wanted to point this out to everybody, is what you said was your father showed you a couple things, but you went out and did it. So there was a responsibility. And I agree with you, same thing, being in charge. My team will say, hey, you're the boss. And I always joke is, you don't really want me to be the boss. If you make me, I always say, if you make me put on my boss hat, then I'm running out of options. I'd rather be a coach. I'd rather be a mentor. A few of our team members here who have been with me for a long time, they always say, I look at you as a collaborative mentor, not as a boss. And that to me is one of the highest compliments somebody could give me. But I think what it is that responsibility. I think being in, overseeing things, and even if it's just yourself of a project, or like you were saying, I'm going out and selling, it's a responsibility to yourself or to others, because your word. I mean, you and I I'm a little older than you, but we come from a generation where your father was probably very similar to my father, where your word was bond. You gave someone their word, or your word. And, I remember my father told me I was working at a job, one of those mom and pop little diner places, cooking. And one day I don't feel like going in. And he looked at me and he says, you do not have to have a job. I provide a roof. I'll provide food. But you gave that man your word, so you need to go. And if you don't want the job, well, then you have to look that man in the eye and tell them you don't want to work there anymore, and, give them time to replace you. And so it is that, I think that's the key of watching you move through the world, is you're very responsible to yourself or to who you give your word. And I think would you think that's a fair assessment, instead of saying in charge?
Oh, absolutely. And that absolutely came from my dad, but also came from my grandfather. We all have different mentors in our life. And of course, from a very young age, it's either usually a parent, a grandparent, somebody in our family, somebody at church, someone that we actually look up to.
Right.
I was fortunate that I had grandparents on both sides that were amazing. Of course, I've got an amazing family, but they taught me different things. So I led a very balanced life. My mom taught me compassion and empathy and love, and hugs can fix a lot of stuff. And my dad's like, you're going to wake up at 5 o'clock every morning, as long as you live under my roof. I don't care if you have a job or not. He actually didn't care if you had a job, but the outcome was you're waking up at a set schedule. And, as long as I can remember, he woke us up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And on Sunday mornings, we had a family meeting at 7 a.m. with myself, my brother, and my dad. My mom was just a bystander, but, she was still there. But that was, my dad worked a lot, as entrepreneurs do. And, that's when he caught up with us for the week. And I don't know the content of a lot of those meetings, but I don't know that that's as important as the meeting itself, and that we had it every Sunday regardless. And there were lessons to be learned there just from the meeting itself. So that was important to me. And through the years, as I got older, my dad, we joke with him now. We joke with him then as well, that he has meetings to have meetings. Right. But it's a different generation, and I think our generation, we try to do it differently. And I've noticed that the generation under us, those 10-minute power meetings to them are much more effective than the maybe hour-long meetings that we sat through. And I try to max mine out at 20 to 30 minutes tops,
Right.
or training, meeting training, whatever. Upper management's a little different, of course. So
Right.
I've always thought it was our paths, as different as they were, they're still very similar.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my father, we had 5 boys, so you sort of had to run it almost a little bit like a military unit, where everyone had chores and there were expectations and everyone pitched in. But I want to touch on that because what you just said, because I think it's something that is often overlooked when you're trying to move a team forward or a business forward or a group of people forward, is that sense of what you just said in terms of consistency. Be it we're always going to have a meeting. We start the morning meeting at 9:00 and it's from 9 to 9:10, and we're going to talk about whatever we're talking about. It's still, I know I have to be there. And there's, again, going back to that responsibility and accountability. Talk to me about you, because you have all of these different things going on in your life and you have these dealerships and employees and other businesses. How do you keep yourself organized in a consistent base? How do you keep yourself so that all those balls keep staying in the air, they didn't fall? So what tools do you use? What's your strategy?
Yeah. So, strategy, and this is something else I learned from my dad. My dad always said that, I don't know how to do a lot, but I know how to find people that know how to get things done. That was one of his fortes, and still is. And so is organization. And he taught me those skills. Of course, my way's a little different, obviously, because
Sure.
we take and we adapt. But I remember I've got stacks in my office here, but stacks of notebooks, and I would write everything down. Well, now with phones,
Right.
It to me, it's a lot simpler. Some people, and there's times I'd rather write it in a notebook, but most of my things go in the schedule. But I'm a creature of habit, hands down. And I've also found, and this jumps down another rabbit hole, but I found as an entrepreneur and a business owner, that's also a bad thing. It's good because I'm structured. I remember the meetings. I don't forget those things. I know that tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I've got training at the Winston store. So I will have content ready when I walk in the door and something to talk about and be prepared for that meeting and the training. And I know who's going to be there because sometimes I need to specialize, and maybe that training is just for that one person.
Right.
And I can do a one-on-one. Everybody will benefit, but I know there's one person that really needs to benefit from it, so they can participate in a group setting without calling them out individually. However, with that being said, if you want to grow and you're a creature of habit, that becomes very difficult. And that's the one thing that I continuously have to work on, because, and I think the older we get, we get more set in our ways.
Right.
And it becomes harder to adapt and harder to change. And that's the thing now, especially the last 5 years, that I'm having to keep pushing that wall and pushing that wall and pushing that wall, because it's like, I think naturally it's like, wait a minute, there's no need to do that anymore. There's nothing else that I need to do. But the other is kind of the devil and the angel on the shoulders in the old cartoons. The other side's like, no, there's lots we need to do. We're not finished yet. So that's
right.
I don't call it a battle, but man, that's where I have to continue to adapt and grow and push myself and have other people push me. My wife knows that. Thank God for her, because she continues to push me.
Well, I think I like what you just said, because it's almost, I have to schedule myself to stop, to look at everything I'm doing. You almost have to plan it as a creature of habit, be it quarterly and I think you're right. Having people around you that know who you are, how to push, but my grandfather, I remember him, he was, I think he passed away in late 70s or something along those lines, age wise, not the year. And he would say, we were sitting there one time at his house, and he said, a lot of my friends are passing away, but he said, it's because they don't have a reason to get up.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to say, I have my garden. And so that was important to him. Or I'm supposed to meet Tracy for lunch on Friday. There was some reason to get up. He said, the minute that you don't have a reason to get up, he goes, eventually you won't get up. So I think to your point is, it's not so much, maybe I have to attain a tangible thing. I mean, that may motivate you, but it is that I think the goal is constantly learning, constantly looking at something else or teaching yourself a new skill. Or, my father-in-law, he's in his 80s, and maybe 5-6 years ago, he said, I'm going to learn German, and just started learning German. Didn't need to, doesn't have to do anything, but it's that constant being a student of life. I think that keeps you young. I think that keeps you, to your point, is having another viewpoint than your own. And the problem is when you do become successful, a lot of people don't want to push you, a lot of people, and that is your challenge too. At least it is for mine. I have 40 people depending on me. And, you also have to balance that risk reward of, well, if I stumble too hard, I could impact all these people's lives. And, so there is that balance, like you said, the devil and the angel on both sides. How far do I push and how far do you go? So how do you, a little in that then, how do you recharge or clarify? Do you actually now find yourself, because you have a team that's running fairly well, or businesses that are, I would say, again, we're in COVID time period, but let's just say they're stable where you don't have to micromanage. Do you find yourself now saying, I want to / have to go away for a few days? Is that the way you recharge?
So since you're asking me, me specifically, this probably doesn't work for anyone else. However, we learn these habits, whether they're good or they're bad. And my dad worked, when he checked out, he checked out. When we went on vacation as a family, we went on vacation, and that's really what he focused on. I find myself that when I don't have those plans, meaning a true vacation, or I'm leaving with my family, or consulting is definitely not a vacation, but I'm not. No. You know that it's the travel's miserable, even non-COVID, right? People think it's so glamorous. Even my wife, when I first started doing that, she would make comments, "Oh, it must be so cool going to all these cities." I'm like, I see the inside of an Uber in the hotel room and eat at a crappy, restaurant in the hotel, or average if I'm lucky, right?
Right.
But anyway, I forgot what you asked me.
I was talking about recharging.
Oh, that's right. See, that ADD kicks in real quick. For me, when I don't have that plan, I have to stay moving. And that's part of my motivation as an entrepreneur. And one of the reasons I really think that I have been successful, because I really get bored easily. Right. You can, my dad always talked about, with us, and we overheard this as kids, or I know I did. He said it to my mother or to other people, but he's like, man, if we could learn to channel that energy into a positive, into a conduit, and it comes out positive, these kids will be super successful. But the other side of that coin, it can also be negative, right? And turn out bad. But so that's me, let me ask you then, but sure.
When you're away, because I'm a little similar, I had to learn, because when we would go on vacation with my 2 boys and my wife, we would go see her family in Puerto Rico, and I found myself at times working, handling things, checking in on things and doing things. And all of a sudden my wife would say, why are you even here? You're working. And so I found a balance of being able to say, well, I'll get up earlier than anybody else is, and I'll take that hour. And so my brain can be comfortable, then go enjoy the whole day. And then at 5 o'clock, while everyone's getting showered up and getting ready for dinner, I'll take another half an hour and check in. And that allowed me to still stay connected. But like you said, like your father was, like, really disconnect. But is that restlessness or when you're away, right, with your family, whatever, is the restlessness of evolving ideas moving forward and thinking about, now I have time to really suss something out? Or is it worry because you're away from the business?
Yeah, so it's not worry. I'm real fortunate because I have a really good teams, and there are multiple teams now. They handle different responsibilities, and I know who to call on for certain things. And that's one of the key things for me as a leader, where I think we tend to hire people like us if we're not careful. And that's not, for me, that's not important. I mean, we obviously have to be able to communicate with them, and we have to like them at least during business hours, right? Right. But we have to find people that have different skill sets, and we can actually plug into that position and do what we need them to do. And a real good example is I've got in my retail store, I always keep a yin and a yang, even though those chairs haven't moved in a while. But I think I have to have a yin and a yang as my sales managers, because they're totally different. If I had everyone that was a type A alpha male or alpha female, then there would be a lot of fights and combustion. But we have one that's, on a scale of 1 to 10, they're an 11, and one that's 2 to 3 on a temperament scale. Skill level still is still off the charts. It has to be if they're gonna work for me for very long. It's just what I require. But I look for someone who actually complement the rest of the team, and I look that way with sales staff as well.
No, and I think
type A's. It doesn't work.
No, I think that's key. I mean, I keep going back to teams, and everybody has a role on the team. Everybody can't be, I was having this conversation the other day with someone saying, there's only one ball. Everybody can't have the ball, but everybody has a position. Everybody has a piece. Even myself, I look at it and say, my job is no more important than anyone on my teams. I just do different things. My responsibilities are not to do what they did. I had a meeting today with my team and said, that's why you're here. You're the experts on X. So when I need help, I'm coming to you to say, here, I need this answer. I'm going to go do my piece, and together we'll make this whole organization, thrive and be better. And I think that's a key of leadership. Of what you're saying is I want to hire people like myself because I'm comfortable with that. Right. And then what happens is you have a room full of you, and that only can go so far.
Well, you can all do this, you have the same personality, you can do the same thing, and especially where I expect a certain energy level. And I'm trying to combine energy levels and talent, and the two don't always go hand in hand. So, we'll have a position open when one becomes available for months. Right. And it's really easy to plug and play. And I found that the folks that come from a traditional automotive setting, and this, in automotive, turnover is ridiculous. So what happens is that person goes out of the position, and the people that come from new car stores or just the automotive world are like, oh, I interviewed a guy today, I think you should bring him in. I'm like, well, they just left yesterday. That would be nice, but why do you want to bring them in? Well, because they've worked here. They've got 18 years experience. That's usually the answer. And the experience levels are variable, obviously. But I'm like, so why do you want them to work here? Well, because they've done this position before. Okay, so why do you want them to work here? That's not the right answer.
No, I think
I have that position open for months.
And
the feeling is key. When you're an entrepreneur is generally me, especially, on the independent side. But I'm okay with it. I'll get my hands dirty until we find the perfect person.
No, and I think that's really important. We're growing here, and same thing. I have empowered my team to do the first round of interviews, and one of the questions I keep asking them is, could you see yourself working on a client's project with them? Like, skills aside,
I like it.
Could you see yourself working on a project? And that's usually my last filter when I meet them. They've gone through the gauntlet. They have the skills. They have this, and I look at them, and in about 10 minutes, do I feel having a conversations, we're collaborating, and I almost get, like, our last two people we hired, literally in 10 minutes, I felt they had already been here for a while. It was a weird click of your brain where you go, oh, they're a fit. They fit here, versus, I agree, I've made that mistake too. We got to rush. We're going to hope. And you're not listening to your gut, which is screaming at you saying, don't do this. Don't do this.
I've done this before. I've done this before. This doesn't work.
I know. I know the end of the story, and the story, I know how this is going to turn out. It's not going to turn out well, but you get caught up in the rush, as you said, of, I just want to plug this because I have to go do other things. And that can really hurt you along the journey. So let me ask you, for your journey, looking back, So when you started, and I remember the story of, you're taking over the dealership from
Right.
your dad and things of that nature. How would you say you've evolved? If you stood outside of yourself and looked and said, there's where I started, here's where I am now, what are some of the things that have evolved in a positive way? And what were some of the things you shed and said, ooh, I don't need those anymore?
Yeah. So I've evolved because, in the beginning, I was modeling after the main person that I'd always had in my life, which was my father. And I tell this story, and as you know, when you're speaking to a crowd or a small group, you read faces and you read body language. And
Yep.
I used to tell this story like, I'd only had my father pretty much to model my managerial behavior after,
Mm-hmm.
and that wasn't a good thing necessarily. And some folks kind of rolled their eyes, thinking I was talking negative about my dad, and that's not what that is at all.
Right.
He taught me almost everything to do right by the things that he did wrong, and I hope that I can teach my children or my team members exactly the same thing in life. Because none of us are perfect.
No.
We make mistakes every day as leaders. Even the best leaders do, and God knows I'm not the best leader, but I wake up with that intent, and I think that's important. I was a boss in the beginning, and I do feel like I'm more of a team leader now because
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you. This is a team environment. We set it up that way. We have team building exercises. We talk about team a lot. Sometimes we force that conversation because
Right.
it needs to be forced. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a constant reminder. We're talking about teams, and sometimes I overhear the forced fun conversations, which is the team building exercises.
Right.
But I think that's part of what we need to do, or it becomes just a job. And, one of the things my dad always said, and it's not original to him, but job stands for just over broke. It's an acronym, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody wants a job. They want a career, and they want more opportunities to grow. So I went from being a boss because of model behavior to being a leader because of, mentors. Look, friends and mentors like yourself and like Michael York, and was a mentor of mine. Tom Hopkins was an early mentor of mine who became a friend of mine. Which is still kind of insane to me. I've always been a reader, even before I read books about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I've evolved with is I've learned to take things that maybe didn't apply to me or what I actually do in my career and take them out of that environment in the book and apply them to what I do and what my
Right.
team does. And a lot of people can't do that. And I didn't understand that early on in my career as a salesperson or as a business owner, because they used to play even as a salesperson, I invested in the Joe Verdi VCR tapes back in the
Right.
day, like $1,299 for 6 VCR tapes, and you could only get them from him, right? And I put them on a credit card and borrowed the money. It was actually my dad's credit card number.
Yeah.
And I had to pay him back. And, he did the right thing. I did pay him back.
Yeah.
But I showed those to the sales team. But that was from a new car store's perspective. It wasn't our process. But I could take that process. I could take the things that didn't apply to me and move it to the side, take the things that did apply to me. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever. Where the other, I looked around the room and, man, wasn't that great? Yeah, none of that applied to us. And I realized early on that most people's brains don't work that way.
No, and I think that's a key trait for someone who is leading a team, leading a business, leading a project, is being able to take that input and filter it through to create a process then that the team can follow. I came from hospitality.
Right.
I was an actor for a long time. And so I also, I always joke, that's the way you ate. You worked in restaurants. But I brought a lot of that organization and franchise ability and systems. And I always equated restaurants with along the lines of dealerships as well, because you have rules and you have processes, but every day could be different. Every day, today's busy, today's slow, same thing in a restaurant. We have this, we ran out of this got burnt. Hey, someone showed up, somebody didn't show up. So that chaos, I was always able to look at the chaos and figure out a pattern. That was my thing. I thought everybody could see it too, until one of my coaches, mentors said, Glenn, your brain thinks differently than most people because what you take for granted, most people can't do. And that's not to just, I'm not patting myself on the back. It's just the way I've always seen things of like a puzzle. I'm going, oh, here's how we go. And this is what we need to do. And we could do it. So I think that having that ability to take, well, what did we learn in the restaurant business about customer service and what could we apply here? It's not going to be that match, that A to A, but it could be, well, this is the way we greeted people and people liked it. So posing the question to the team and saying, well, if we wanted to greet people and make it, how would we do it? And let them evolve the process. And all of a sudden they go, well, we could do this. We're like, okay, we'll try it. And I think getting them involved in that resolution, that solution, a lot of times wins them over. And I think asking questions of your team, even if you know the answer, it's more getting them to sort of go where you want them to go, but they think they're driving the ship and all of a sudden they've bought into that. And I think that's a key. And I love that because it's, what you said is being able to arch that over. Too many people, especially if they're in one business for years or they're in one business for a while, it goes back to what we talked to earlier, without outside influences or just having that inquisitive mind, your processes get stuck and eventually everything else is evolving past you. And if you're not constantly evolving with the expectations of the world around you, you're going to become antiquated and people are just going to stop buying your products and services.
Oh, you're right. And look, I really wish that that's something we could teach. And I don't think it is. I think your brain, I think you can push somebody in that direction, but that doesn't mean they're going to think that way.
Right.
They may adapt a little more, but a great example, which doesn't have to do with processes, but it's still about adapting things from another world or another lifetime. For me, when I was 16, I was working as a roadie in South Carolina, right, for bands.
Right.
The band would essentially give us $20, and $20 we had to promote the band. And if they had X amount for the house, they would take us out to eat. I mean, it really didn't matter. We were 16 at the beach, right?
Right. It was great.
Right. Oh, it was fantastic. However, I learned that $20, man, that's a lot of money at that moment in time at 16 years old. And then you realize it's not that much money, but you had, I wanted to put people in there because the band, or at least the lead singer of the band, had sold us, which is what we were just talking about, we were on their team. And if they were successful, we were successful. If they were famous, we were famous. So we were drinking their Kool-Aid, which,
right.
That's kind of, maybe take that derogatory, but still, we have to believe in their mission, and I believed in the mission, right? And that's what we're doing as leaders. So we take that $20 to drive people into the venue for the night, with really no results. I mean, yeah, but we believed in what they did. So I would have done it for free to be realistic with you. But that taught me a lot about marketing, because we were on $20 trying to drive people into a club to see these bands, and branding and marketing, which Automotive is better than they were, 10, 15 years ago, but I still think they're so far behind almost every other industry, especially industries like real estate, for example. Mm-hmm. Real estate's had this mastered since I was a kid, right? And I don't know how much they've evolved, which isn't good, but it's also scary for automotive because I don't think we've caught up to them yet as far as branding and marketing themselves as their own entity, meaning the realtor. Salespeople still don't do that, and dealers most certainly don't do that. Right. So those lessons I learned in another lifetime ago as a teenager, just because the way my brain processed things, the second I got in automotive, I'm like, oh man, this is exactly the same thing that the band was doing and teaching us to do to drive this traffic, because they were branding us. And when I became a leader, I'm like, that's the same thing that lead singer was doing. He was getting us to jump on his train and blow that horn as loud as we could for the band. To the public, that's the same thing I need my team members to do for me. So yeah,
I think that the reason we can talk about automotive, we can talk about restaurants, we can talk about businesses, it is that sense of I have to invest in you, right? I have to invest in my people to get them going. I had a interview with David Kane, a few months ago, and I loved what he said. He said, it's, you're putting emotional deposits into your people.
Right.
Because then there will be a time that you may have to take a withdrawal because you got to have that conversation with somebody, but they at least know it's coming from a place of goodness. You're trying to help them, just like coaches did for you on sports. There was always that time they were like, come here a minute, and you're not, you're letting the team down.
Right.
But I think to your point is I agree with you. I think businesses can get too reliant on the product's just going to sell. And the product's great. But as one of my mentors in the restaurant industry said, I was working in New York City at a very nice restaurant, and he would tell us every day we would have meetings. And he said, and this was pre-social media, but his whole thing was, we have to deliver a great experience every day, because if Tracy comes in and has a great experience, he's going to go tell his friend. And when they both come back, if we don't deliver that great experience, Tracy looks bad in his friend's eyes. They're both not coming back. And so he always pitched the experience, because he said in New York City, there's a million places you can get a steak. Mm-hmm. Million places. He says, so the steak's not important. It's what's around the steak that's important. And that's what we have to build consistency in. And we all drank the Kool-Aid of, we're going to be the best, and what great experience. And I think that, going back to what we were saying about automotive, I think we forget that. I think it's, here's the car, instead of going, I've said the car, because so many of them now are very similar. They look very similar. They're all around the same price point. Yep. They're the steak. And with the automobiles, it's not as if you have a chef in the back that has the magic sprinkle dust that's going to make it better, or just that little better. At the end of the day, it is that relationships. And I don't think businesses spend enough time on the customer experience. They've relied on, all customers want our speed up with technology, and all customers want is a price. I'm going, yes, but if that was really the case, why would Starbucks be that big? Starbucks doubled down on experience, selling you that experience. And they're a great example of all their employees really drink the Kool-Aid, or, whatever coffee drink you want to say. Like they're all in on the experience, and you're paying $4 or $5 for a cup of coffee because it makes you feel a certain way, that they paid attention and they made your coffee just your way. And I think that, to me, as you're saying, that is the job of that leader, is to have a crystal clear vision and really sell it. But you got to invest in your people and train them to do it, and compliment them when they're doing it, and appreciate them. I mean, that, to me, I don't see enough of that going on in business.
No, there's not. My son just got a job at Chick-fil-A.
I saw that.
He's 18, senior in high school, and we're just hoping right now as parents, I don't think he cares. We're just hoping we could see him at an actual graduation. But another story for another day, right? But he got a job at Chick-fil-A, and he came home, his typical 18. Well, it's just job, it's just job. Yeah, that's where I want to work because my buddy works there.
Right.
It's better than the other fast food places, but it's still just a job. Well, 3 days in after training, he's like, oh no, this place, unbelievable. And he's talking about the training. He's talking about the way the management team speaks to him. He's talking about the way the other teammates have already been trained to train him. So they're training, the trainers have trained people to train the new people.
Right.
So he's already amazed. So that was a good marketing lesson for me. A life lesson, but definitely a marketing lesson. I said, so son, I said, a year ago, what were you hearing about? Chick-fil-A was everywhere. Oh, yeah, it's Chick-fil-A and Popeyes.
Right.
Absolutely. So what do you hear about Popeyes now? Oh, nothing. What happened to their chicken sandwich? It's still here.
Right.
There's people that still eat there, but the experience, and it may taste better. I've had both, and they're different sandwiches, right? But that's not the point of the conversation. The point of the conversation is the experience at Chick-fil-A is so far superior than anything at most Popeyes. I can't lump them all into a category, but I think it's just public knowledge. Chick-fil-A's processes are stellar. Their restaurants are clean. Their staff seems amazing, and if they're faking it, man, they're really good actors and actresses, So it's pretty impressive. But that relayed over to an 18-year-old.
See what you just were saying, and this is again from what we need to do as if you want to have a successful team, is just simply what you said is, Popeyes again, just insert any other business. What they're relying on is an individual to step up and deliver, create that their own personality is, well, if I'm going to do this job, and that's just certain people are that way, whatever job I'm going to do because of their, growing up or whatever, the expectation is I'm going to do my best. So if I'm at Popeyes or wherever, but it could just be a one-off. What Chick-fil-A is doing is, no, we expect everybody to be at this level. And if somebody gets in, if somebody is an overachiever in that, they're going to be even higher. But our expectation is everybody's going to be this. But the key is they've built the processes, they've built the culture, they built the environment where you can't not do that.
Right.
Part because they're going to push you. And number two is when you get in there, the Kool-Aid, like you look around and everyone's doing it. And that to me is something that really pushes, and you see certain businesses accelerate because when you look around and everyone's doing it versus I'm looking around and I'm the new guy and I'm doing it, but everybody else is no longer doing it. And they're sort of laughing at me because, oh, Glenn's following the rules. I remember when I follow the rules. Don't worry, kid. You'll be that to me is the sign of a business that will just plateau eventually.
Sure.
And maybe they'll stay, but you're going to have turnover because people are going to get bored, or customer service. People will have to shop there because they feel they have to versus they want to. And I think that's a really great lesson for your son to be early on in that type of environment where he has a great starting point where he now can look around at other businesses and go, this wasn't like that. And hopefully he can start seeing the balance of saying, well, that's better. I like that better. And then, then now you start searching out companies. And then when you're interviewing for a job, you're actually looking for companies that will help you be successful versus, well, you have a job, figure it out. That's why you're here, which happens a lot.
Well, and I was really fortunate. This kind of circles back around to hiring the right people and taking your time. The reason that most of those people buy into the processes, and they have to have those processes, that culture in place, nothing takes, right, is that they hire the right people most of the time anyway.
Right.
And I'll say this as an industry in automotive, we tend to be really, really bad at that. We hire the wrong people because we don't take our time, and we rush through it because we're trying to put out a bonfire with a garden hose.
Right.
It just doesn't work. We're always rushing, and going back to, I was fortunate, collecting my thoughts here. I was fortunate because of COVID, they did their interviews with my son via Zoom.
Oh,
which normally wouldn't happen. So he didn't want us to hear him, but of course, I want to hear the interview just because I'm an entrepreneur, and I want to hear the interview because that's my son. He's going for his first interview, right? He went through 3 interviews with 3 different managers or 3 different people. I don't know that they were all managers for a fast food restaurant before they hired him. And it took about, it was almost 2 weeks because I didn't get this job. He was kind of freaking out a little bit. There was 2, 3, 4 days in between the interviews, and the questions were, they were obviously written down questions, but they were all different questions,
right?
Mostly different questions. But I was amazed. These were 10 to 15 minute interviews with an 18-year-old for a fast food restaurant with 3 different people that I'm assuming that they all had to sign off on the person before they moved to the next interview, just like you said you did. And I do the same thing, by the way. I'm the last person to interview. If the team likes them or the immediate supervisor likes them, then they pass them, and I'm the last one, right? So I was kind of blown away. And then the onboarding process was something next level as well, because I worked at fast food restaurants, and of course I haven't in a while. But I'm going to say that most fast food restaurants, most companies in general, don't have the onboarding process that they do. They actually mailed him his uniforms at home with a checklist and welcome letter from the president. It was really impressive. So, that stood out to me. And now I'm thinking, man, how's my onboarding process? Because a lot of times, and we've discussed this in the past, it's been a few years, but we know that even if we hire the right person, which we don't often do, then the onboarding process, how much time do we spend with them when they actually get here? Do they feel like they're lost? And I'm pretty sure that most, and look, I'll take responsibility. I've probably lost, I have lost some good people because the boarding process stunk or was non-existent. It is now, but at the time, that's one of those things we learned, going back to a question from half hour ago, as I keep jumping down different rabbit holes. That's one of the things. Another thing that I've learned, that hiring the right person, onboarding process is key. So, and not nearly enough companies do that.
Yeah, I find that when I see a lot of companies, I think they actually, some of them, their onboarding process is pretty good, but it lasts maybe a couple days or a week. Where I find, and even companies that may have a longer one, let's say it's even a month, it's then what happens? It's like you get thrown into general population, and it's from month 2 to month whatever. Then that's where they really disconnect. Like a lot of times people, because I've gone in, you have 2 consulting, I ask them, what's your onboarding process? And they have the beautiful training manuals and they put people through, and then like, okay, well, what happens after day 4? Oh, well, they just go out there. I'm going, that's why you lose them, because no one's helping them apply what they learned. It's just, okay, put it in your head, you go figure it out. And as you said, that's where that frustration comes in. Okay, well, great. We got a couple more questions I want to ask you, because then we want to wrap up here. I asked you earlier what you thought your evolution was. If I went and talked to your team and said, describe Tracy in 3 or 4 words, what do you think some of the words would come back from your team?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually asked that about 2 months ago. Involved was number 1, and I like that. I like
that's a good word.
Yeah. Yep. I'm in my back cave office now, and around me in front of the computer, you can't see, but I'm not in here. One of the questions from, once again, 15, 20 minutes ago, as we kind of try to circle back around, you'd asked me, the things I'd done right and the things I'd done wrong. When there was once I put together a great team, and we were having record months and then a record year, and hey, they know what they're doing. So I moved my office out of the showroom and I moved it over here to the back cave. It took about 18 months, even with the team meetings, even with the right hiring, training, onboarding, not spiral out of control, because we've never been there, but you see a direct reflection in those numbers when I wasn't involved. Not meaning that I'm micromanaging, but when I'm absent.
Presence, just having a presence is being involved.
Right. And, I think some industries can do it. Some companies can do it. Some organizations, leaders can do it. I don't think that's one of my strong points. I'm an involved person. And when they said, look, I'm involved, I like that. I think that you would hear I swing pretty heavy. That's not necessarily a good thing. That's not a one word, but there were different words to describe that. When I asked, well, you can be, you swing hard one way and you swing hard the other way. But I say, look, don't mistake, and this is my dad justifying some things, so I'll do the same, right? don't mistake my passion for anger.
Yep.
And I don't have a temper. If they see me raise my voice in that way, they know when I'm angry, and it's usually justified. But I really try to control that, because the folks I work for and came up with in automotive, they were 0 to 100 in 1.2 seconds.
Yeah.
And they're still out there, right? And I don't think that's a good way to maintain and sustain business of any kind, not just automotive, over time. So I've worked on that over the years, and children taught me, having children, which are teenagers now. Taught me a lot about that, right? Because that usually doesn't work with them. You can scare them, and they can do things you say out of fear, but that doesn't work long term, and you can't produce what you. I mean, even if they do what you want them to do, they're not going to do more than what you expect, because fear just doesn't. It's not a good motivator for the majority of people anyway. So those are really top 2.
I love those. I love those, because just being around you, I can see that being involved, and you have very high demands of yourself. And I think for me, just watching you and knowing you, I think the other thing that I admire about you and have a lot of respect for is the fact that I don't see you really asking your team to do something you wouldn't do. Right. So if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for them. That doesn't mean that, see, I'll go the opposite swing of the bat. Don't mistake your kindness for weakness.
Right.
I think that you challenge yourself, you challenge your team, but it's also coming from, as you said, if I'm going to not hire somebody, I'll roll up my sleeves and get in there and do it myself, because that's what the team needs. I think that's a really good one that I would say for you as well, is that you lead your life, you lead your team by example of how you move through the world. And I think that's really important.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And you know me in multiple industries now. And, like at our big wrestling convention, which, it takes 10 and a half months to get that thing together. Of course, we have monthly events too, but it's nothing like the annual event.
Right.
It would be really easy for me. I take that back. It would not be easy for me to let the team handle it, because they're well equipped to do it. Right.
Right.
But it's not in my DNA just to let them do it. And some people would look at it as a negative to be a doer. And I'm okay with that. But I enjoy being a doer. The folks that come on at the any of the stores on Saturdays, I love coming in Saturday mornings because service department's not open. The business office isn't open. We don't have meetings. We have training, but we don't have meetings.
Right.
Come in early. I love to actually walk the lot and sweep the sidewalks and wash the windows. And it's already been done. But that helps me clear my mind. It helps me take ownership, or maintain ownership mentally, I guess,
right.
And pride in something that my family's worked for so long. I mean, and people go, "Why are you doing that? You're the boss. Let me do that." I said, "No, you don't understand. I enjoy doing this, and I've done it since I was 8, 9. I mean, whatever." So there may be some nostalgia in there as well. But my dad always told me, he said, "Don't ask anybody to do anything you wouldn't do. That doesn't mean
Exactly.
you have to do it."
No, but that's something that people can smell that a mile away, is that as soon as you get a title or you do that, you change. And, my wife always says to me sometimes, "Why are you doing this?" I said, "Because I can, and they're doing something else. So, it has to get done." And that's okay. To me, I'm going, it has to get done. Now, if they should be doing it and they're not doing it, that's a different reason.
Totally different. Right.
They always laugh. They always do. They always laugh at that. So anyway, hey, one last final question, and then I'll let you get out. But first off, I want to appreciate, this is fun. You and I could chat here forever, ever.
Right.
But when you have that new person, so I asked this, so even if your son comes to you or someone joining your team new and they're young and they want to eventually move into being in charge of a team, or saying, "Hey, I want to run a team," or I that job looks really good. What is your best advice to them? What's something they can do, read, think about in order to put themselves in a position where when they're there, they're getting off on the right foot?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So first of all, I think they have to be a part of a team in some capacity to understand how a team thinks and works. It doesn't have to be a sports team, but I think it's really important. I'm sure there are leaders and people who have not been part of teams of some sort in the past and became good leaders, just like there are great coaches in any major league sport that was an average player at best.
Right.
But they still made it to the major leagues, and you see that, right? And so that means they had talent and they listened. So be a part of a team, get all the information you could get. And look, when you was coming up in restaurants and acting, and I was coming up in whatever the heck I was doing at the moment, right? I always had that thirst of, I need to find out how to do this.
Right.
And once again, I was a reader. I'm still a reader. And of course, I love technology and the internet, and this kind of sounds like war stories to my team. I'm like, and I just said this morning, you don't understand. I had to go borrow $1,200 from my dad to buy Joe Verdi VCR tapes.
Right.
And all the information you need is right here for free. You don't even have to go to the library. I had to beg my mom to take
get the library card
and drop me off in small town USA when I was growing up during the summers, which I enjoyed and she didn't mind. But still, you don't have to leave the house, which can be a good thing and a bad thing, but
Right.
take 10, 15 minutes and soak in all the information and the knowledge that you can. And look, I give my team reading lists, and this goes back to boss and leader, which we talked about already, but we used to have company reading where I gave the book at the beginning of the month and I mapped it out. Okay, look, if you read 6 pages a day for every day that you work, I want to make it easy, right? Because I knew most of them probably weren't readers. And we had conversation. We had 3 or 4 questions. Man, I was so proud, but they hated every single second of it because I was making them read, right?
Right.
And it didn't work. And I was just blown away. Why isn't this working? This is the best plan ever. But nobody likes to be forced into doing anything that they don't want to do. So I still give out the books and I have a reading list, but if they want to read it, great. They want to have a conversation about it, great. But I feel like I'm doing my duty by giving them the list and actually buying them books. And I get sad sometimes when someone leaves and I find all the books in their bottom office drawer and they've never been opened. But you have to get over that.
You can. I agree with you. You can only provide the opportunities. You can provide some gentle nudging.
Right.
But to your point is, we hated it as kids when our parents would say, do it because I told you to do it. And just, there was no discussion. You hated every minute of that. Yeah. And so I agree with you. I think you're doing the right thing by providing them, giving them, and some of the people will rise up, but those are the 20% that are going to rise up and want more. But listen, there's 60% that are happy and they're going to deliver great value to you, and you have to embrace them as well. And, be there for the ones who want more. And I think that's great. So, thank you so much. This has been so incredible. Everybody who's watching, if you've made this far, and I know many of you will, because again, I've been watching and people come back and they watch all the way to the end. Again, please, again, subscribe. Please share this. Tracy shared a lot of great information. Just one last thing, Tracy, if people wanted to follow you, because I know you're very active on social media, if somebody wanted to connect and follow you, where do they follow you on social media? How do they find you?
Yeah, so the best place, because I'm the most active there and I enjoy it the most, hence why I'm the most active there, is Facebook. I've got a fan page, but go to my regular page. Okay. It's real. You can send me messages. My cell phone number's on there. I've got websites and all that other stuff, but I'm truly active on Facebook. I just enjoy the platform. So find me there. It's Tracy Myers, and once again, just ignore the fan page. It's fine, but it's just impersonal. I find it impersonal. To each their own, but I just like the regular Facebook page. So find me there. Okay, great. And again, follow Tracy. A lot of great information. He is truly, like, who you're listening to. That's who he is. He's very generous with his time. So again, thank you all very much. Please share this out. Thank you, Tracy, so much. And as I say at the end of every episode, you're in charge. But now Tracy gave you a few more tools to help you become more successful. Thank you again for your attention, and I will see you next episode. Take care.